and a storyteller.
Nice.
And expansion. Yeah, it's beautiful because storytelling is exactly one of the two main elements of shamanism, together with ecstasy, which is being in an altered state of consciousness. We've already shared that being in a state where you are in deep contact with yourself, that can be reached through a variety of ways, through the drumming, the rapid eye movements, the repetition of movements of the body, or the tapping, or through a particular technique of breathing. And the storytelling is the second element, originally from the tribes. The way they live and pass on their stories to people, to ancestors, from ancestors to sons and daughters, is through the art of the storytelling. So the way they narrate what's happening in their village when they go out for hunting, and then they come back, and what is important is not what happened, but how it happened. So who they met, what, for example, the animal did before passing away, before sacrificing himself. And this element is just not simply the way of saying things when we are speaking. If we take this element into our life, the way we narrate our reality, it's absolutely making a big difference in our life. The way we say stories to ourselves, the way we introduce ourselves to others, makes also a difference in our way of thinking, in the way we are using our mind, because that's, we know that is the biggest element of as an enemy. And under the card it speaks about expansion, which I think that is beautiful, because when we are saying our own stories, we tend to have our own perspectives, and we are closed in our dimension. So we are closed in our box, and the things that we know, that we think keep us safe. But when we are meeting other people, actually we come into contact with different realities, with different stories. And sometimes we are not able to recognize that these parts are actually parts of us, but we have fear, simply because they seem very far, they seem at the opposite side, but actually they maybe hold parts of our stories and pieces that we have lost, and we just need to collect back. They are like the parts of, in the art of kintsugi, and repairing our wounds with the gold of awareness. They are those pieces that, when two parts of the pottery are broken, one of them is missing, and so you need to substitute that part with a part of another pottery. So it's something that you don't have. Like in the art of kintsugi, there are 3 ways of repairing pottery. One is called hibi, so 2 pieces of the pottery got broken. It's like you do in your everyday life. 2 pieces of the mug got broken. You use the glue to put them together. So in the kintsugi, you would use the gold and of course the lacquer to put them together. They pretty much fit, and then you highlight this fracture with the gold. Then you have the kakeno kintsugirei, which is a way where a part of these pottery is missing, so you substitute the missing part with a lot of gold, with a lot of element. And then you have the yobitsugi, where you don't have that piece anymore, so you need to find the piece from another pottery, and of course add a lot of gold as well, because it's just like creating a mosaic, a patchwork. Yeah. And this is beautiful in the terms of expansion, that sometimes we can take pieces from other people's lives, from other stories, and absorb them, make them become part of us, integrate them in our stories. At the beginning, maybe we don't agree with what they say, with what they think, with their stories, but what is important is that we don't judge them, simply because we don't know where they're coming from, what's the story, what's their background. And sometimes, especially the fact that we are meeting people sometimes that are very different from us, we are unable to recognize that actually they are mirroring that part of us that we are missing. So this is presented to ourselves as a sort of mirror, where we need to catch that element and take it back to us. It's just like in the process of the healing in shamanism, you would do in the soul retrieval, no? A part of your soul that you have lost, the healer would go and find that part that has disappeared for a variety of reasons and give it back to you. So that piece is coming back to you. And in that way, the final result, when you have a variety of elements that are originally don't belong to the original part, to the same roots, that is representing the beauty of that, because we have a variety of colors, a variety of materials in us. And we know that sometimes when we meet people that are so different and have different elements inside their lives, we are fascinated. Yeah. We are attracted by them because they are not regular, they're not normal, they're not ordinary, they're absolutely out of the box, because they have taken their elements, especially through the art of traveling, through the journeys. They have listened to other stories, they have added extra colors to their stories because they have a lot to say, a lot to share.
I think as well, coming from a perspective as a songwriter, the storytelling card is such huge, I just saw it and I lit up inside. When we're talking about expansion, stories are something that are so much bigger than us. And I think that's what that means to me, especially if you're writing a story, if you're telling a story, it goes beyond you. Mm-hmm. And I think that expansion, it's so much bigger than we can even ever fathom, and I think it's beautiful what you were saying about the pieces of people and kind of likening them to mosaics in that way, of how we can almost become a patchwork quilt of the people we encounter and the stories we tell ourselves and create. And it's just important to reframe, I think, how you tell your own story as well.
Yeah. What I think is important is to avoid the mistake that we sometimes do when we start saying something and we start saying, but they say, mm-hmm. and the sentence of they say whom.
Yeah, exactly.
It's something that you have heard, maybe you have read on Facebook, and you don't even know what is the original source. But yes. Then it becomes true, mm-hmm. because people keep reading something and repeat it, so it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, and then maybe there is a lie behind that. It's not even a true piece of news. But it's simply the system that wants us to believe something through the power of the press, of social media, and it becomes stronger and stronger because more and more people decide to go and hold that flag, but maybe they don't even believe in that.
Something people do now, which is a lot more acceptable, is they kind of tell themselves a certain story and they use that to define who they are. And a lot of the time, I think that keeps people stuck in a kind of almost victim mentality. And unfortunately now, the society we live in kind of celebrates / encourages that to an extent. And I think everyone's been through something, but you don't need to let that define who you are, because you're so much more than that. Like, your soul goes way beyond what has happened to you and what this experience in this lifetime has given you. So I just think that it's so important to not fall into that trap. And I think everyone's done that at some point. There's been phases in your life where you have just defined yourself by something that happened to me. And it's not about not acknowledging what's happened to you. I think that's really important, and doing any healing work around it that you need to. Yeah. Potentially some shamanism. If that's
any form of healing. They are all, if they are done from coming from a source of love, it doesn't matter what sort of healing you. The same dish can be realized in a variety of recipes, and they're all valid, they're all good, they all have their final touch, if they are realized from a place of love. So following certain guidelines, I would not say even protocol, because we are not doing a surgery, but you need to be guided by your intuition and knowing that it's not coming from you, from the place of a healer, but it's coming from, you can say, spirits, or I don't know, in Reiki it would be the universal source of energy. So it's not you doing the healing, but you are guided in what you're doing, so that it doesn't become a gesture of ego. I'm just a vessel, but I am using the energy as a container that is working through me. Yeah, it's very true what you were saying about not defining yourself when you are introducing yourself to someone. Otherwise, you put yourself a label, which means basically a box where you're trapped. because the more then you keep saying but I am this, I am that, the more you are reinforcing your issue, your problem, your definition. And it's an excuse for which then you become a victim and you hide yourself behind this sentence, especially when a traditional doctor medicine has defined you with some letters. Particularly don't like when people give a definition of letters for imbalances, diseases, syndromes, or whatever. So I sometimes say the ABC one, because there are different letters, and every time people say to me, but I have this and that, and then they feel secure because they have been defined in that way. Fine, because at least you know how to treat that, but don't keep every time reinforcing that sentence, because otherwise it's becoming part of your cells, part of your atoms, and you truly embody that disease. It becomes part of you, which doesn't mean that you don't have it, but just treat it as a generic form that is neutral, that not necessarily has the definition of those letters.
Because I think you put power behind it when you keep repeating it, and it often happens with people who have just been through something fairly traumatic or survived something. And it's like, I think there needs to still be a sense of distance between you and what happened to you, because yes, you experienced it, but you're not that. You know, you're so much more, as we've said.
Yeah, exactly. And then maybe sometimes a doctor says that you are A, but actually then after some years you discover that actually instead was not even B or Z or whatever. It was a variety of components, because we know that physical diseases come from the mind, so and from emotions. So it's a variety of elements that you are collecting in the journey. So who can really even say that you are one thing or the other one?
On a side note, the faith people put in the medical system astounds me sometimes. But that's just a personal opinion. But I think it's also like, no one, you know yourself the best, and that's why I think it has to kind of come from you, and as again be guided by your intuition as to what the best path is, depending on what is happening or what you're experiencing. But what you were saying about physical diseases kind of showing up, relating to the mind, that in itself is just a huge piece of wisdom there for the Wisdom Wednesdays, which is, you know, if your mind is not a great place, that is going to affect how you show up in the world and how you experience life. So it's like, I always think of the mind sometimes as like a dark room, and you've got to like open up the shutters in it and the windows and just let light in, and maybe put some flowers around it. Like, take care of that space and cultivate it so that it's a beautiful place, because you're going to be with your mind for the rest of this lifetime. So it might as well look nice, you know, and feel good and nice, you know?
Yeah, I believe that the traditional medicine and the complementary medicine, they need to be together. There's not that different forms of healing are an alternative way. They are complementary. You need to use both. Then as a traditional medicine, you can find something according to your tradition that can be more coming from the West or Ayurveda or whatever is just more suitable for your beliefs, your way of being, what you need to treat, absolutely. And then at the same time working with some other ways to heal sources that can't be healed simply with taking a pills. So the two things need to work together, because for some sort of diseases, if you take a pill to make it quiet, you're not solving the roots of the problem.
Exactly, and often they come with other side effects. So I mean, that's why I avoid all like drugs if possible, and even ones that are supposed to help you or anything like antibiotics. I'd much rather go a natural route for healing. That's just me. But when you're talking about that, a lot of the time they'll heal the symptom of the problem, but they won't heal the problem. The problem still exists. So and then people end up taking medicines that have side effects, which give them other health issues, and it's just a vicious cyclical thing. And I've seen that happen, and it's just terrifying.
Exactly. Or you can decide to take the medicine because it's absolutely a personal decision, and also because sometimes the complementary ways or some other ways of taking medicine have takes longer, and sometimes you need to act quickly and straight away. So that is acceptable, that is fine, but just don't do that only. Ask yourself, that organ in my body, an organ is a spirit at the end, because it contains an emotion. So it's not like a dead part of your body, because the liver contains the emotion that is related with your fear. The heart contains the emotion that is related, of course, with your love, and the same for each organs of our body. So they're just not dead parts, but the whole body in itself also is contains and is related to our emotions, our way of thinking. The beautiful then ending part of the journey is that when you removed all the part of the flesh in the body, and you just think about the skeleton, which is the true essence, so nothing added on top, which actually Buddha shared. One of his first meditations that he shared with people was the meditation on the skeleton, so that you see yourself in your true essence, at the point where you are simply bones, where there is nothing added on top, and you are meditating on the emptiness of the elements that are connected with the human rebirth.
That's really fascinating what you're saying about like each organ being kind of related to an emotion. And then it was really intriguing to me when you said fear with the liver, because that made me think of a lot of people who unfortunately struggle with alcoholism. A lot of people drink because they're afraid, and that dulls that. Alcohol dulls your sense of awareness, your sense of reality, your perception of life and feelings. And then when you just said that, I just kind of made that link, and I was like, that's really fascinating to me, that fear is what's associated with the liver. And then when people do drink or struggle, unfortunately, that does dull that, you know? It's just an interesting link. Awesome. Should I pick a card?
Yes.
Card number 2, baby. South Shield, Innocence, Inner Child.
Of course, if we speak about the inner child in general, of course, it's one of the many archetypes that we work with, and I have to say that the majority of the time is one for sure of the most important, that is related to everyone's issues that are coming from part of our childhood where something was not working properly. As I was sharing this, without that element of playfulness, that element that maybe in parts of some of our lives we couldn't be a child. We had to grow up quickly. We had to, for example, some people had to start working earlier, or they had to be the big sister, the big brother from their sister or brothers in their families. They had to be moms, they had to be fathers as well. So that element was not at its full expression. And so that is why that this element of playfulness needs to be replayed back again and reminded back again at some point in your life, because otherwise you miss like a component that is that happy part of the innocence point, the innocent point of view, looking at things from a pure perspective, a part for where your eyes are pure and they don't see the bad aspect of things in people, which is the element that is something that all the kids have in common. This part related to the inner child is something that is traveling with us and is still part of us, even if it was not expressed in a life from a physical level, but it's because it's that part of us that wants just to have a break, have fun, play with people, because we do that. We know that not necessarily we need to have a toy. We need to have a toy to play with people. We play with people in terms of smiling, laughing, making jokes, having that element of not being too serious. It's a part that is a South Shield, because it's connected back to our parts that are related with our passions, with our element of fire, our element of being warm, our element of being pure, being genuine, and not seeing necessarily that there is something behind, that there is something backwards, that there is something with another purpose, with another goal, when we are sharing conversation with people, which is while instead something that later on in adulthood we tend to think the majority of time that something is hidden, something is behind, that people are not necessarily authentic by themselves. And when we are children, also the fact that our concept of beauty simply is the fact that we have realized a drawing, we have done something, and we are coming over there and we are showing that to our parents, our friends, our people around us, as if it was the most beautiful things that we have done. So we are not afraid of the judgment, we are not afraid of what other people think, and that is our sense of beauty, showing what I have done, because it's a part of me, showing my work. When nowadays we realize a piece of art, we do something and we keep it hidden, because we are afraid what other people are going to think, to say, but it's very different from what I've done, but it's not a piece of art that I can have in an exhibition, but that was not the purpose.
And I think what's so beautiful about innocence in the inner child, and just children in general, is that there is no ego there at all, really, that comes to the forefront the same way it does when you're an adult, if that makes sense. You exhibit generally pure joy, and seeing the world through the eyes of a child is so, it's so fleeting, and I think that that's what makes it kind of a sad card, but it's like a bittersweet sadness. It's not like a really in the depths of woe sadness. I think there's everyone that I have spoken to anyway, I think would probably want to be a child for a day again if they could, you know?
Having no preoccupations, having no worries.
To experience the feeling of freedom in that way, which you don't really realize you have at the time when you're a child, because you don't have the capacity to understand it then. But when you are older and you look back at what it was like to be a child, or you reflect on memories, you can see how different life is and how little you had in most cases to worry about. Obviously, some people have different childhood experiences, but that's why it's so important to work with the inner child always, I think. And I've personally found doing a lot of work around that has been really healing for me, and continuing to do that, because it's not something in my experience that can just be fixed. I think it's a lifelong journey of going back to that child and making sure that they feel like held and seen and safe, and all of these things that maybe didn't happen, not necessarily through anyone's fault, but a lot of the time just circumstances, or perhaps the people around you haven't looked at their own wounds, and that has transferred onto the child. So I think there's a lot of goodness that can come out of looking at the inner child.
And also living a life without planning, because a child would just go out, think of something, thinks he need to meet someone, go somewhere, maybe dreaming of something, but not necessarily planning. We plan and we think of, and what if that happened, and what if that doesn't happen, and we deprive ourselves about living sometimes that moment, because our mind is so much involved, and not necessarily we are in contact with that element of pleasure, of just simply going there and experience what happens. Regardless if it's going to be beautiful, or if we are going to be our expectations are going to be met or not. Placing a shield on ourselves, which is like not living. We have a protection, but it's not protecting us from anything, because we are not learning that lesson. And maybe sometimes we need to bump against something, and face something, so that we can learn that at a lower expense than maybe in other times where it could be, or it will be worse.
I think as well, I found that just incorporating in general, actually something I've been trying to do a lot more, is spontaneity, and just doing things spontaneously as someone who is quite cautious as a person. And I've actually found that some of the best memories and experience have come from just deciding to do something in the moment and going and following that through. And if you were a child, like, you wouldn't second guess that. There's also no procrastination when you're a kid. You just go for it, you know? And it's interesting how the stories, to link it back to the previous card, that we tell ourselves as well can hold us back from just living in that childlike wonder and just going and doing it. Now, obviously, as adults we have different responsibilities and things which you didn't have as a kid, so there is that difference, but that doesn't mean that you can't incorporate elements of childlike behavior and childlike play. Like I was even just having a conversation a couple of days ago about how with creativity, playfulness is so important. Like it's just so essential, and it's something that for a lot of people I think dies because we look at creativity as something that it's almost an industry now as well, so it's kind of got this spin on it, and actually leaning into having it be fun, just seeing what happens, not putting up all of these voices and criticisms about what you're doing, because kids don't do that. They just let it happen, and then they're so proud of it because it's come from their heart, it's come from an honest place. And why edit that? Like, why edit that because of society or other people's voices? Just allow yourself to be authentically you. And that's hard because there's a lot of conditioning and things that have happened to a lot of people that make it difficult. But it's like, that's the first step, I think. And it's a great way to begin that journey, is to just get in touch with the inner child work. It's hard, but it's worth healing.
The inner child, as I was saying at the beginning, is one of the main important archetypes. Archetypes are simply patterns that we recognize as something that the whole mankind is related to. It refers also to our behaviors. Every part of every role that we are performing, every time we go to the stage in general, we are embodying an archetype. And if we think about the Greek mythology, for example, which is full of archetypes of roles, of ways of performing in the theater that actually represent us in our daily lives. And we are doing something, we are embodying an archetype.
Yeah.
Because the archetype can be also the archetype of the singer,
Yes.
which officially doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But there are some elements where, for example, you are concentrating on your throat chakra and working into that. So what are the most common elements that each singers have, or some of them have, is that their main focus is on the voice, the main focus is on the throat chakras. So sometimes maybe other parts of other chakras, other parts of the bodies are forgotten because that one is emphasized. So you can create exactly archetypes coming from each way, or each time you embody a role, you play a role.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see as well how, to an extent, society has created a lot of these archetypes and continues to, I guess, emphasize certain stereotypes about them.
The most successful ways, also from a marketing point of view, advertisement point of view, are the things that are simple.
Yes.
The things that grab your attention in 1 second.
I know we talk about social media a lot on here sometimes, but I think there's this pressure to be doing the next biggest thing that will make everyone go, whoa, for a moment. But actually, as you were saying, it's the simplest things and the interpretation of a simple thing conveyed in a way that really resonates with people. That's way more impactful. I'm just thinking in terms of like in social media and from a marketing perspective, than something that's really flashy and big and has a lot of production involved in it. Like, yes, it might be a spectacle, but people won't connect with it and remember it in the way that they will a simple thing that they really resonate with. So I think that that's something to keep in mind as well, that mundane, everyday, ordinary experiences are kind of what people are craving a lot more now, because for a long time we had media that was so filtered and was so just perfect. Everything was presented with a shiny, clean way that wasn't reality. And I think you've seen that move now, especially with other platforms like TikTok, and the way people are sharing things now. It's a lot more rough and raw. And yeah, people are wanting more of a real glimpse into life and not such a production. I think for our conversations, sometimes there's so much wisdom that we just have to edit it down. No, I'm kidding.
Or not enough.
Yeah, not enough. So
yeah,
really resonate with both of those cards.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
have a lovely day, everybody.